what's up, fight fans? You're watching Octagon Control MMA. I'm Dan. We're on to the co-main event at UFC 256. We've got Tony Ferguson versus Charles Oliveira. Both coming into this fight off very different recent performances. Obviously, we got Ferguson, who recently fought Gaethje, didn't quite go his way, and Charles Oliveira with his third round submission win over Kevin Lee. It's going to be a very interesting fight. I'm calling this one early. It's going to be fight of the night, in my opinion. It'll be very exciting. I reckon it's not going to go to a decision, but it is going to go to the third round, and we'll have a stoppage in the third round, I think. Okay, so let's start off talking about Tony Ferguson. I mean, up until his most recent fight, 12 fight win streak, longest in the division, very entertaining guy, always interesting. Everyone always wants to watch his fights. I don't see why anyone would not watch any of his performances. I'll have a quick talk about how he did against Gaethje there, which was not his best performance by any means, and I'm sure he'd admit that himself. I mean, he looked good out of the blocks first round. A lot of stance switching, his usual unorthodox striking. I think he should have gone for a takedown. I know everyone talks about Gaethje's takedown defence, but Tony Ferguson's definitely got the advantage on the ground between the two of them, and Gaethje's probably got a slight advantage in the striking. So for my money, it made sense for Ferguson to take it to the ground. He didn't do that though, and it was a straight up 5-round slogfest. He only got stopped with a minute to go in the 5th round. Justin Gaethje's one of the hardest hitters the lightweight division's ever seen, and it took him 23.5 minutes to stop Tony Ferguson. So despite the fact it's a loss, I think he conducted himself well. Nothing to be ashamed of at all. He just got beaten on the night. What else did he do? He got a knockdown at the end of round 2 that was good. He was throwing he was throwing leg punches, which is interesting. You don't see that a lot. If anyone watched this, I'm sure they remember the throwing of the sand, which was entertaining to say the least. But things like that can trick your opponents, give you the opportunity where you might not have had it. Anything to give you a slight edge in such a close fight. The Imanari roll he tried in the 5th round, maybe if he'd tried that in the 1st round it'd have worked, and I think if he'd have blasted that from the off, it would have completely changed the fight. A Ryan Hall style Imanari roll, played around in the 50-50 position on the ground. Justin Gaethje's not used to being made, doesn't want to be there. Tony Ferguson would have, even if he didn't get the finish, he'd have given Gaethje something to worry about for the rest of the fight. It's not what he chose to do, but he chose to stand and bang with him. One of the most entertaining fights, easy fight of the year contender. But unfortunately, it didn't go his way in the end. I mean, just previously to that though, I mean, his 12 fight win streak, I think people are discounting him for the Oliveira fight just based on the fact that he's lost his most recent one. Let's not forget he lost his most recent fight to one of the best in the division, one of the hardest hitters in the division by far. Most vicious leg kicks I've ever seen out of a lightweight from Justin Gaethje. So I don't think it's the bad loss that people are saying it is. And if everyone remembers, he cut weight twice for that fight, which was stupid for want of a better term. But Tony Ferguson's going to Tony Ferguson. I mean, he's El Kukui, he's unpredictable. He's going to do what he's going to do, and we're all just along for the ride. And I mean, he's very entertaining. No one can take that from him. Alright, moving on to Charles Oliveira. He fought Kevin Lee in his hometown, Rio de Janeiro. Not as impressive as I think people seem to remember this one. I watched it back earlier today, just to refresh my memory. I remember watching it. It was, I think it was the last fight before we stopped for the pandemic early this year, March 14th, I believe was the date. And I think people remember this being more dominant than it was. And I think that's purely because of when you look at it as a whole, the 7-fight win streak with 7 stoppages, it looks very good. But he didn't do as well as people seem to think in this one. He didn't have any control on the ground at all, which is where you'd expect him to dominate. He came out in all 3 rounds early with, flying kicks, flying knees, a lot of very flashy stuff. But when he shot for the takedowns, I think he thought he'd have just jiu-jitsu'd him to death, and Kevin Lee's superior wrestling was kept him in dominant positions. Don't get me wrong, Oliveira was always trying stuff, always looked dangerous, throwing up triangles, going for arm bars, kimuras, all sorts of stuff, and kept Kevin Lee honest. Kevin Lee couldn't get off much ground and pound because he was scared to posture up in case he got caught in something. But Kevin Lee was definitely getting the better of a ground game. And again, it was a wrestler versus grappler sort of fight, which I appreciate for people who don't watch that often. It can be a confusing difference, but wrestling's the one where you get the position, and jiu-jitsu's one where you get the submission. I know that's not a full explanation of it, but just in the most basic terms. And Kevin Lee controlled the position of the fight. Okay, so moving on to the third round, Oliveira got the stoppage within the first minute. He jumped to guillotine, which he was very lucky to get. Don't get me wrong, he sunk it deep. I mean, Kevin Lee, when he came after he tapped out, he wouldn't let go. He thought, I think he must have gone out. Mike Beltran was there holding him down. He thought the fight was still going. But the main thing I noticed on this one is Oliveira started to look a bit gassed towards the end of the second round. And I think that's just because of how busy he was on the bottom. Especially Kevin Lee did miss weight on this one, but he's very big for 155, weighing in well over 170 on fight night, I'd have thought. And definitely the bigger fighter on the night. Okay, so now we'll do a quick side-by-side of the fighters where I assign the various attributes. We've got striking, grappling, fight IQ, chin and gas tank. Okay, striking first of all, Tony Ferguson. I just think he's got a massive advantage in this. I mean, 12 knockouts to 8 knockouts may not seem like that much, but I think Tony Ferguson does focus on his striking. He's much cleaner with it, much more unpredictable, and I think he's definitely getting the better of this one if it stays on the feet. Grappling, I'm giving to Oliveira, but again, you could say this one's pretty even. Tony Ferguson, very good on the ground, 10th planet jiu-jitsu style, rubber guard, that sort of thing. He's always looking dangerous, and if it does go to the ground as well, Tony Ferguson's got those sharp elbows. But if we're just going on a pure jiu-jitsu sort of grappling criteria, Oliveira's definitely got that. I mean, 19 submission wins. I think 15 submissions in the UFC, something like that. Very impressive. I think he's got the record for most submissions in the UFC, which isn't surprising if you see the way he fights. That is what he looks for. Okay, moving on to fight IQ. Again, I'm going to give this to Oliveira, purely because of the way Tony fought Justin most recently back in April. I don't think Tony was very smart in the way he approached that fight. He wanted to show that he could stand and bang with the best stand and banger in the division. Yes, he can do that, and he did that for 23.5 minutes, but then he got stopped. Tony Ferguson had a massive grappling advantage over Justin Gaethje. He could have used it, he chose not to, and then he took the price for that. Oliveira, on the other hand, he knows exactly what he's good at. He's a very accomplished grappler. He knows where he wants a fight to be. All his striking seems to be based on setting up a takedown, getting the fight to the ground so he can do his jiu-jitsu there, get the submission, walk off with his bonus check. Chin, Tony Ferguson, hands down. Again, not purely because of a Justin Gaethje fight in this one. It's worth mentioning the Justin Gaethje fight was the only time he's ever been TKO'd. Excuse me. Tony Ferguson, absolutely, he ate so many big shots in that fight that would have dropped anyone else. And you see it on Justin Gaethje's face, he couldn't believe it. Tony Ferguson wasn't going down. So yeah, chin, 100% Tony Ferguson. Gas tank, again Tony Ferguson. As I said a little bit earlier when I was talking about Oliveira versus Kevin Lee, he looked like he was gassing him a second round, and I think that's partly because of how active he stays, but partly poor time management. I mean, Oliveira, as a rule, he does his best work in the first 2 rounds, and then he hasn't got many finishes in the third round. So yeah, gas tank, definitely Tony Ferguson all the way on that one. He's just he can go all day. He never looks, even when he was getting battered against Gaethje in the 5th round, he looked more injured than tired. I mean, he wasn't breathing heavy. He was still light on his feet, and he was doing what he wanted to do. Okay, finally time for my prediction. Tony Ferguson by knockout, 100% on this one. Not much up for debate for this. I think people are sleeping on him because of a Gaethje fight, as I've said a few times already. Oliveira, if he wins, it'll be by submission, but I think Tony's good enough on the ground to nullify anything that he'll try. So yeah, Tony Ferguson by stoppage, 6-4, plus 150, 6-4 is. I may be wrong on that. It'll be up on the screen now though, so you'll be able to see the numbers there. Also on this fight, I have gone for the fight not to go a distance at 4-11, just as a bit of a side bet. I mean, between the two of them, they've gone to 10 decisions in nearly 70 fights, and recently I don't think they've gone to a decision in the last 10 between them. I can't see this one going all the way, so I've put a few cheeky quid on 4-11 not to go the distance. Alright, so that wraps up the co-main event of the evening. Later on tonight we'll be talking about the main event, Davison Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno, for the flyweight title fight. They've both made weight earlier today, so that's going to go ahead. I can't wait for that one. I've got a few interesting opinions, I think, so let's all look forward to that. Okay, you've been watching Octagon Control MMA. I've been Dan. Hope everyone has a great night, and we'll see you a bit later.